Hello viewers, welcome back to Docker presentation series. This is B.S. Satyadev, Assistant Professor, VNR, VJEC, Computer Science and Engineering Department. So in the last presentation, we talked about how the Docker containers are created, and the way it works is that we write a Docker file first, which is a text-based file whose name is Docker file, just Docker file without any extension. Now we give this file to a command to Docker client whose name is Docker. So Docker, the word Docker itself is a CLI, right? So command line interpreter. So that guy is the client that takes this file automatically and generates an image, Docker image. Now that Docker image is like a template of what needs to run, and that template, when you say Docker run, that will run the application inside the Docker container. So basically that is the process. Just to understand one more time, let's see how it worked. So basically, I think in the last presentation also I talked about this. We write commands in Docker file. There are certain commands in Docker file which we are going to learn in this next presentation and on. And we create this file, and in a command, at a command prompt, it could be Windows command prompt, terminal command prompt, anything, or Linux prompt, anything. Once the Docker host is installed in a machine, that machine will have a command line interface called Docker, Docker. So that is actually the CLI, right? So when I say CLI, I mean to say, this is what. This is what. So this is nothing but the Docker, right? So of course you need to have Docker installed in Docker host installed in your computer. Once the entire ecosystem is installed, you have Docker host as well as the CLI as well as the REST API. That's what we seen in the last presentations. Now let's go to our current presentation. So again, before we move to the actual presentation, so Docker file, when you give Docker build command, that would actually automatically takes the Docker file as the input, and it sees the content and creates an image file. Now this image file, again we have to provide the name without any capital letters or anything like that. So just plain lowercase letters, and that name actually is an image. Now that image actually, once it is created, we can see in the Docker, there is a desktop based Docker thing that you can see, that you can see that Docker image file in that. Now on the image file, if you say run, that will run the actual Docker image and creates a container, which is nothing but the Docker container. Docker container, same. So container is a general name. Docker container is a container created by Docker. That's pretty much what it is. So again, we can do the same thing on the command line also, like Windows or terminal window, anything to everything. So we can do that. So that's pretty much how the things happen. This is what we have seen already in the last screen. Now in this presentation, we will see the structure of the Docker file. So at a high level, not in detail, we will see the commands in the next presentation, but in this only see the structure of the Docker file. So Docker file structure. A typical Docker file follows the structure. There is a from statement. So it actually starts with from statement to specify the base image. Again, I already talked about what is the base image. So basically Docker is a container, right? It's a box. Now you want to put your stuff there. If you are to, and you are actually interested in your stuff rather than, your stuff means an application, basically your application, rather than worried about the box. But who is going to give you that box? That's what given by the Docker. That is nothing but the basic image, right? So the box is already provided by the Docker repository, which is Docker Docker repository, and we have to specify that base image in the from command. We will see in the things how it is specified. Then we have to set up a working directory for the Docker to start with. So that means you have a box which is given by the Docker system itself, Docker registry itself, then so that box is there. Now you have to put your application. In order to put your application, so you have to set, okay, my application is this in this working directory with respect to the current computer. That's what the working directory is. So you have to specify the working directory. Then we have to specify all the dependencies using add command or copy command, something like that, copy or add command. Um, so then we have to say any dependencies that configurations that needs to run with the run command has to be specified also. Then we have to set the environment variables. If there is any environment variables that our application looking for, we have to set those environment variables. If there are any ports, this is an interesting concept which I will discuss more further later in later presentations. There are any ports that we want to expose, through our application, we have to specify expose command and expose that. Now, what is actually port? I think this I already discussed in one of the presentations, but I'll just reiterate. In any computer that wants to talk to another computer, right? So the communication has to go through networking, right? So how the networking works, the networking, so for example, there is a computer, there is another computer. Now these two computers wants to talk to each other. Now how do they talk to each other? So there should be some channel, right, in order for some way of communication. That way is through is through having ports. That means again, is it port is like a physical thing? No, actually there is some physical thing, but that could that is for only one wire, physical wire to connect. But wire is not the port. The slot that is there to plug in the wire is also not the port. I mean, we call it as port, but it's not the real port. What port software ports are like? A computer has got several, I mean, I think to the power of 32 possible values of numbers that are available in this computer. Similarly, in this computer also, to the power of 32 number of numerical values are available. Those numbers are nothing but the port numbers. How it works is we have an application. We will bind the application to one of the ports, like to the power of one of the, say for example, if it is HTTP application, we bind it to port 80, right? 80 is a number, right? So similarly, so like that, we bind the application to a port, and so that means even though the actual data is going through this wire, it actually contains the port number. So it is how it is challenged. Like multiple applications travel to the same physical thing, right? So same physical wire and stuff like that. But at the same time, they have their own different port numbers and all that stuff. Now, this is connected to a different computer. Now that computer also has a physical port. So let's say you connected these through with two wires. Now, of course, there is something that make sure that it goes to that. That's a different story. So once it goes here, there is a receptor for this application. So for example, I have an application X, right? That application X is running, say, port number, say, like 9999, four nines, right? For example, I'm just making an example. Now, this guy has to connect to this computer, and this is trying to send something to an application in this computer, right? So let's say this is one computer, this is another computer. This application, now this computer also has to open something, okay. Whatever comes from the port of that computer from 9999, I want to accept it and process it. That's how intercomputer communication happens, right? So, so again, this guy also has to reach some other port. That port may be, 22222. I think, I don't know, something like some number like 4 twos or 5 twos, doesn't matter. Now, this is the sender, right? This is the processor, like receiver, or the server. So whoever processes the things is called server. Whoever sends the data is called the client. I mean, it's just a nomenclature. Sometimes this guy can also become a server. It's possible, but let's say this 999 guy has to keep sending data to this 2222 guys. So that means this guy should know that there is an application that is waiting for my data at a port number 2222. So what this guy does is he will send the data to that port. So this guy knows that, okay, from 9999 of the other computer, I will get some data. He will pull the data, process it. This is how communication happen between two computers. Now, when it comes to Docker, even though I think we have been telling about virtual machine and stuff like that, Docker is also a kind of virtual machine. The only thing is it is missing operating system, right? It uses the base operating system. So in that context, in that context, it also has got some ports, right? Now Docker has port, but this is running on a host computer, right? But that guy also has a computer. Now you want to map those ports, like, okay, for this port, this is, I mean, somebody wants, it has to, let's say this Docker wants to send something to some other place in some other computer, right? So in that case, first it has to send to this one, to that one. Let's say Docker specifies port number 60. I'm just making an example. But that port number 60 is for Docker. But what is the port for the actual computer that wants to send the data to some other computer? It's like Docker sending to the host computer, host is sending to some other computer, something like that, right? So in that context, um, it has to map a port in host computer. Let's say 60 in the host computer is available. You say 60 maps 60. I mean, Docker 60 maps to the host 60. Pretty much the same concept, right? That's good. But let's say 60 is not available. Somebody is working on that. 61 is available. So Docker 60 is mapped to Docker host 61. That's so you. So basically, how do you expose such kind of things? You expose through expose command, right? So how do you, like, that's what port exposure means. And also there is what is the first thing to start, whether we give using cmd command or entry point command. So this is basically, these are the predominantly majorly used commands. Again, there are not too many set of commands that are available, few commands, but these are enough to create an image. So let's see a example file. Now in this example file, see the from command. The from command says maven colon 386 OpenJDK 17. So that means, as builder, that means I want to get this base image. This is the base image. This is the base image. I want to get this base image, and what it is going to contain. I mean, by the name itself, we understand we will contain JDK 17 plus Maven 3, Maven also. Now, from where it will get the base image? It will get the base image from the Docker host, right? So, when you say this from command, when you run this command, when you give this command, this file to for building, like Docker build, the the Docker build, what it does, it reads this from, okay, I need to get this Maven image, base image. Then it will go to Docker host, downloads that, and keeps it in a local machine. That's pretty much what it does, right? Now, as builder, it is just an alias that we are giving. Instead of, let's say you want to refer this name somewhere else in this file, then you just use this, as alias. Now, this second command is working directory. That means it is following Linux notation. So I will say working directory /app. So from the app folder, I want to as the root directory. Now what is it I want to copy? I want to copy pom.xml, all the source code src into this is that means I want to copy a pom.xml from the app directory to Docker image that's going to Docker image file that is going to be created, plus all the in the app folder there is another folder called src. You copy everything from that. That's pretty much what these two copy of pom.xml as one single file, and the source code in the src folder. That means entire src gets copied. Now run, so because it is copied, run mvn clean package -d skip test. Now how would it work? When you are actually, so in order for, this is actually imprinted into the image. It's not going to, do anything, right? So initially, so run mvn clean. When it is running, what happens is that it uses mvn. What is mvn? Mvn is the name for the maven. Now where is maven? Maven is already there in the Docker image, right? So that's what I told you in the beginning. So so because the Docker contains the, it cleans the package, right? So and also skips the test. I mean, let's not too much worried about how Maven works. Maven is just a package manager, right? So so that's what it is. Now this is one layer or one stage. On top of that, we are creating another create another runtime image from OpenJDK. This is one example, right? So this is another example from OpenJDK 17 JDK Slim. So this is something like another image. Again, it will go to Docker host, which is the Docker registry. I think I already talked about Docker registry, all the Docker hub and all these things. So Docker registry is a place where people keep images for the public exposure, right? Further, Docker created a site called Docker Hub. Docker Hub is the name of the Docker registry. Docker registry is general concept. Docker Hub is a specific name which is created by the Docker itself. Right? That's pretty much what it is. So it will go to the Docker Hub and pull the image. Similarly, same thing here also. Then again, I'm setting the working directory app, copy, blah, blah, blah. Here I'm exposing 8080. So that means this will try to connect to the 8080 of the host itself. So I'm exposing the Docker port 8080. I'm setting the environmental option. So which is like, again, we don't need to worry about entry point. So basically, entry point is like, application that needs to run. So basically, it's like Java command has to run Java with option -jar, and the jar file is app.jar. So this is how it works. So basically, what we have done is we got a machine, a Linux machine. Basically, it is Linux machine with JDK 17 with Maven installed, and then we set up the directory. Then we created another thing from the OpenJDK, copied into that another image. Then into the current image. Then we are creating the working directory. Then copy command also. This command is actually copying the files into this jar file, and it exposes 8080 environments and the enter part. This is how the whole thing Docker file runs, right? So I will show you a live example later to show you a file there, so that in the later presentation that you will understand more clearly about. So basically, these are the commands that we use in the Docker file. So thank you again. We will see each and every command in the next presentation, how it works and all that stuff. But for this presentation, just to understand that Docker file contains some keywords, commands that allow you to manipulate and create an image from the file. That's pretty much what it is. Thank you very much.
Like, share, comment, and subscribe VNR Digital Learning Resource YouTube channel.